Welcome back to another exclusive entertainment deep dive. Today, we're exploring one of Netflix's most anticipated upcoming series and the conversation that's already shaping the future of romance storytelling. Stay with us as we go behind the scenes of Bridgerton Season 5 with showrunner Jess Brownell. Attention! This podcast interview news is intended for listening purposes only and not for view. Bridgerton Season 5 is still many months away, but as LGBTQ+ people around the world celebrate Pride Month, Shondaland thought that one of the best ways to commemorate queer joy and triumph was by talking with Bridgerton's showrunner Jess Brownell. Brownell says is shepherding next season's central romance, the love story between Francesca Stirling, Hannah Dodd, and Michaela Stirling, Masali Beduza, as fans eagerly await the next 8 episodes of Bridgerton to see just how these two women become one. Brownell takes a break from polishing Season 5, chatting with Shondaland from a sweltering London about Pride, Francesca and Michaela's journey, and what she hopes fans of all backgrounds can learn from their intoxicating romance. Malcolm Venable says, "Happy Pride, Jess! Before we kick off in earnest, I have to know, how have you been celebrating Pride?" Oh my goodness, well, London Pride is actually in July, so we are waiting to officially celebrate Pride here in London. I will definitely go into Soho at some point and be with the community, but yeah, just living my life and working on Season 5, which feels like a Pride celebration in its own way. Right on, we are all so excited to see it. So how does the Season 5 love story fit into or expand the existing tradition of queer storytelling on Bridgerton? Jess Brownell says, "I feel like it's important for us that Season 5 feels like an extension of the storytelling we've already done on the show. It is still Bridgerton. It is a queer story, but it is, thematically and tonally, very much a Bridgerton season." That being said, we're really excited to expand on the way the show gets to represent different love stories and allow more of our audience to feel seen by this season. Malcolm Venable says, "Bridgerton has always been celebrated for rewriting the rules of historical romance, but a lot of people don't know that the Regency era was actually full of queer people who were living and thriving. What do you wish people knew about queer history during this time period? And how is it relevant today?" Jess Brownell says, "Thank you for this question. It's been so interesting since we announced who we're focusing on for Season 5 to see a little bit of the reaction. I have seen some voices saying, but I don't think queer women existed in this period, and it's just not true. Research indicates that there were many women who lived together. Historians sometimes call them romantic friendships, but we know from a modern lens that many of these women were partners, romantic partners. I think one of the best examples is the Ladies of Llangollen. They were 2 upper-class Irish women who lived together for 50-some years. They refused to marry, and they often hosted many artists and members of the nobility." Malcolm Venable says, "Queer characters are often relegated to the side or to best friend roles. What does it mean to you to elevate these characters to the central romantic arc of the season?" The exciting thing about having a queer love story as the primary focus of the season is that we get to explore their relationship with so much more nuance and depth than we might get to if they were just a side story. I think when queer love stories only exist in the periphery, it's easy to fall into stereotypes and to not delve too deeply into who these people really are. So with Fran and Michaela, we get to explore them and their love in a really deep way. Queen Charlotte, the real Queen Charlotte, became so fascinated by them that in the 1800s, she wanted to visit them. We don't know exactly what Queen Charlotte knew about their relationship, but we do know that she fell in love with their life together so much that she asked King George to grant them a pension so that they could live together and not have to worry about financial security. There are many examples, if you do a cursory search of this time period, that show us that queer women not only existed, but that there was a certain level of knowledge about their relationships, and even a certain level of acceptance that might surprise people today. So I'm really excited with this season to get to hold space for a lot of those women who existed in that time period.
Malcolm Venable says, what kind of myths or tropes about queer people, specifically women, were you passionate about avoiding or turning on their head? Jess Brownell says, we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the Season 5 writer's room researching and discussing tropes about queer women in media representation because it was really important for us to find ways to do something new and not fall into anything that could be harmful. It's difficult for us to discuss too many of those tropes without getting into story, and I don't want to do any spoilers here, but two of the biggest ones, I think, are bury your gays or dead lesbian syndrome.
We were never going to kill off any of our main characters in any season. But more importantly, I think that trope speaks to the idea that queer people so rarely get happy endings in media. We knew on this show that we wanted to give Fran and Michaela a happy ending, and they certainly do get one. The other huge thing is just about the male gaze. It's something that we talk about every season, but especially with two female characters, making sure that we're rooting their emotional and their physical intimacy in the connection between them, in the yearning between them, and in their character growth. Own who you are and step out of the expected path, and instead pursue what's really meant for you. So that's something I've tried to really imbue into Fran and Michaela's journeys as well. Malcolm Venable says, what can people who are not in the alphabet communities learn or take away from the representation they'll see this season? Jess Brownell says, I think that theme of difference as strength is something that resonates, hopefully, far beyond sexuality. Whether you're deciding how you want to live your life, what kind of relationship you want to have, do you want to get married or not? Malcolm Venable says, how has your own journey influenced the way you write the vulnerability, fear, and relief of these characters coming into their own? I think as a queer person, many of us spend our lives pre-embracing who we are, feeling like our difference is something to potentially be afraid of, that it is something to even be ashamed of. But a big part of my journey as a queer person is realizing that my queerness is a strength, and it's something that once you embrace your authenticity in your sexuality, it allows you to embrace your authenticity in so many other aspects of your life and own how you want to live your life. Malcolm Venable says, as you were writing or thinking about the season, did you think about what you would say to people who were in that time period trying to be their authentic selves? Or in some cases, actually being their authentic selves? What would you want to say to them 200 years later? Something that I think I'm trying to say with the show is that we will remember the people who lived their lives authentically then. I think queer love, just living your life and loving who you love, can be a radical act in itself, a radical act of bravery. I think it's a shame for those radical acts to not be remembered. So by holding space for the fact that those relationships did exist, in a way, this season is our love letter to those people to say, thank you. Do you want to stay in the career that you're in or not? Do you want to live close to home or move away? Do you want to have children or not? With all of these big decisions in our lives, society dictates an idea of what is expected. But I hope that this season encourages everyone to embrace that they don't have to follow an expected path, and they can be their authentic selves. Malcolm Venable says it's a love story, and exactly that, not a trauma story. And yet, obviously, there were very real dangers and threats at people at the time. How does the story remain rooted in that love, while also conveying the courage it took for them to be themselves at the time? The love is at the very center of the story, but I want to be clear that just because I say this is a story about queer joy and not one about queer trauma, it doesn't mean that our characters won't face obstacles. They will face difficulty, they will face conflict, they are up against societal pressure, but ultimately they will prevail and have a happy ending. To take away any obstacles or difficulties would be to strip our characters of agency, and you don't want to take stakes away from a story. I want to feel like they earned their happy ending, as every other past lead has. Malcolm Venable says, lastly, what do you hope the legacy of Bridgerton's queer representation will be for the romance genre at large? Jess Brownell says, I'm hopeful that by telling a queer story on such a large platform, it will inspire more stories. Books, TV shows, movies.
It's been lovely to see the reception to heated rivalry and to see the way that audiences and executives have realized that stories about queer men can transcend and be relatable to all audiences. I'm really hopeful that this season will do that with queer women as well. Because we can only tell one story at a time, and not everyone is going to be able to see themselves necessarily in the specifics of that story. But if we have more stories told, then we get more opportunities for people to get to see themselves represented. Bridgerton Season 5 will premiere on Netflix in 2027. That was our look inside the conversation with Bridgerton's showrunner Jess Brownell, offering new insight into Season 5's vision, its evolving romance, and the storytelling behind one of Netflix's most anticipated upcoming releases. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.